Healthcare conferences naturally attract physicians, oftentimes around a specific medical specialty. This video describes how you can identify these doctors by medical specialty and geographic location based on some simple filters. And it goes on to demonstrate how to then use their Twitter handles to build an audience dashboard where you can observe their ongoing conversations. Let's imagine that we work on an analytics team that supports medical affairs at a pharmaceutical company. One of the medical affair teams that you closely work with is focused on the cardiology space, and their geographic region is the European market. You've been charged with developing a list of cardiologists from Europe who are influential on Twitter, and to then monitor this group ongoingly to learn about them both as a group and as individuals on a variety of subject matters. The annual European Society of Cardiology's Congress is just completed, and you think it may be ideal to use the Twitter conversation at that event to identify a large group of influential cardiologists, to then extract their Twitter handles and to use those handles to populate an audience dashboard where you can study the group moving forward. So let's start by creating our first dashboard that surfaces the Twitter conversation from that event. In our search bar, I'm going to use the event hashtag ESC Congress. And we'll select the dates, which ran from the 27th of August through the 3rd of September. And then we'll choose our Create button. When the dashboard populates, note the summary numbers for total tweets and users. This is the complete and unfiltered tweet stream produced by all participants during the selected dates. What we're going to do now is filter the dashboard to create a list of participants in the Twitter conversation at this event in 3 ways. We only want doctors who are from Europe and who disclose in their public Twitter bio that they specialize in cardiology. So first, I'll choose Add a Filter, and I'll select the Stakeholder filter to include doctors. Then I'll add a second filter, this time the Location filter, and I'll just type Europe, and we'll select that. The Location filter has levels of granularity that include continents, countries, regions like states and provinces and territories, and even cities. And to filter for multiple locations at once, just enter them one at a time and select them when they show up on the list. The last filter we're going to choose is the bio description. The bio description is where every Twitter handler has an opportunity to write a little something about themselves. And we're only going to want to surface those individuals in the conversation when certain things are being said in that Twitter bio, things that would suggest they're a cardiologist. And what I've done is I've prepared a comma-separated list here of many different ways that somebody may refer to themselves as being a cardiologist. And since we're in the European market, I've done so in multiple languages, in this case, English, French, and Spanish. For your own needs, you may want to be more or less aggressive, but I'm going to copy this list and come back to my dashboard and paste it right in here. Now I'll rerun the dashboard with these filters in place. Note the change in the numbers listed in the summary widget. The tweets on this dashboard are now limited to just those that meet the criteria that we filtered for, and we've identified over 300 such doctors. To see who they are, let's go to the influencer section of the dashboard. The default view is going to be using our simpler rank algorithm as the metric. These are those parties that our identified group of doctors were engaging with the most. But we want to change that view to give us a list of who those European cardiologists are. So I'm going to come up here to the upper right and choose my gear icon, which is where the options and settings are. And I'm going to change this from the default simpler rank to tweets. This will show me who was tweeting who matched my filter criteria at the top of the dashboard, and they'll be enlisted in the order of who was tweeting the most. And if we look at this in table view, you can see their Twitter bio where they self-disclose. And you can also see that they're from Europe. And lastly, I want to point out the column on the far right titled HSG score. That stands for Healthcare Social Graph Score. This is where we can see how impactful everyone is in the overall healthcare discussion taking place on Twitter over the trailing 52 weeks. And we're going to leverage that score when we decide who we want to include on the list that we're developing. Now we want to extract this group's Twitter handles, and we'll do that by exporting this report into a CSV file that we can then open in a spreadsheet. So I'll go back to my options and settings, and this time I'll select Export as CSV. The file that we just exported can be found wherever your computer has been set up to receive downloaded files. Usually there'll be a folder titled Downloads. Just for a quick demo purposes, I've already opened that up using a Google spreadsheet. But you can also use Microsoft Excel, Apple Numbers, or any other number of different spreadsheet softwares. There'll be some fine differences on how this works depending upon which you use, but the basics are the same. And we're really interested in two columns. The username, and I'll just highlight this here in red, and the HSG score. And we'll highlight that one as well. So to start out with, we're going to want to reorder this dashboard because currently it's in the order of who is tweeting the most. And we want to sort it by who has the highest HSG score. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to come over to my column where the HSG score is. And I'm going to click that little downward arrow next to the column heading. And you can see I have ways of sorting this. And I'm going to choose to resort this entire sheet based on this column's Z to A format. That will bring the highest numbers to the top and reorder all the other columns with it. Next, I'm going to come over to my username column. And this time I'm going to add a new column just to the right of it. I'll choose Insert One Right. And there's my new column. Next, I'm going to write a simple formula. I'm just going to say that this cell is equal to this cell. Then I'll add my ampersand sign, quote, comma, quote. What I'm doing is I'm going to add a comma to the end of every one of these Twitter handles. And that will give me a comma-separated list of Twitter handles that I can copy and paste into a brand new dashboard. When I hit my Enter key, it's going to prompt me if I want to autofill this column. And I'll go ahead and do that. Depending upon what software you're using, you may have to drag that formula down. Now just to show you, we've got a comma after every one of those Twitter handles on the list. So now I'm going to go ahead and select that top 50. And the first one is in row 2 because we have a header row just above it. So I'll highlight that. And then I'll come down to row 51. And there we go. I'll hold down my Shift key, click row 51. Now I've highlighted everybody, and I'm going to copy those. Now I'll come back to Simpler Signals. And when I do, I'm going to create a new dashboard. So I'll go back to where we started. And I'm going to use those copied Twitter handles as the data sets to do so. Now, we're tracking tens of thousands of Twitter handles in our system, and we just happen to be tracking all 50 of those cardiologists already, so we're able to fully populate our dashboard with their Twitter handles. I'm going to leave this date range at the default 7 and choose the Create button. The dashboard will populate with results based on tweets made by the 50 European cardiologists captured, plus tweets made by others who are mentioning them. We call this an audience dashboard, and those can be incredibly useful when you're wishing to better understand a group like European cardiologists. Rather than having a dashboard that's focused on a specific conversation or subject, now you have one that instead can inform you about the subjects that are important to that group, their collective opinions on specified topics, and who among them is most influential with their peers in the digital space. In just a few quick steps, we've been able to build a dashboard that's going to be useful for some time to come. You can learn more about an audience dashboard in our use case training outline and video titled, How Can I Use an Audience Dashboard?